Hello Batman fans, and welcome back to yet another marvelous video. Today we have something extra special for you. I know we all love the Justice League, but guess what? Since the 1980s, the DC Universe decided to give us another team of superheroes that all the misfit kids would love even more. And you guessed right, we're talking about the Outsiders. They were just a bunch of superheroes who either worked individually or didn't see any purpose in their lives, but Batman had the brilliant idea of bringing all of them together to create yet another family, but this time with a twist. So who exactly are these Outsiders and where did they come from? We're going to explore all about it in today's video, but before we get too deep into it, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Where did this team of Outsiders come from? Obviously, everyone's favorite Batman has always been associated with just one team, the lovely and eccentric Justice League. But who are these other people who call themselves the Outsiders? Well, they're a bunch of superheroes who work a little differently than the Justice League. I guess you could say that they have their own set of rules. We first heard about this team when the DC Universe published a comic book with the title Batman and the Outsiders in 1983 by Mike Barr, Jim Aparo, and Adrian Roy. The first issue of this new comic series was given the title Wars Ended, Wars Begun. Of course, you probably want to know about the story, which goes a little something like this. In the opening scenes, we find out that Bruce Wayne has sent Lucius Fox, the amazing CEO of Wayne Enterprises, to a nation known as Markovia for work. But soon, it appears that there's a revolution going on in that nation, and Fox has been kidnapped by people who are apparently known as the Freedom Fighters of Markovia. Now, this is the first time we get to see this nation. It's a small country in Eastern Europe, and it's ruled by King Victor, who lives in the capital city of Markov. After this terrible news, Batman obviously wanted to take action. He's clearly concerned about saving his friend and the innocent people of Markovia who are getting dragged into the war. So he obviously goes to the rest of his team, the Justice League, to ask for their help. Despite knowing the kind of situation Bruce Wayne is in, the Justice League says they can't get themselves involved with it because it's a matter of nations, and it might end up in diplomatic problems if they were to attack. Batman is disappointed and angry at their reaction, so he decides to quit the Justice League and goes to Markovia alone. At the same time, in this nation, King Victor has been killed by an oppressor, someone who's in a high position in the Nazi Party. After his death, his two sons, Gregor and Brian Markov, are tasked with looking after their country. Let me remind you, these are all people that we meet for the first time in the DC Universe. There's another new and rather interesting person whom we're about to meet, and her name is Dr. Helga Jace, and she's a widely reputed scientist in Markovia. And apparently, she's been doing experiments that can give people certain kinds of superpowers. At least, that's what happened with Gregor and Brian's sister, Tara. In fact, it looks like due to the ongoing war, Brian is also willing to let Dr. Jace perform experiments on himself and give him some powers. Soon enough, it looks like a familiar figure has appeared, and it's none other than our very own Jefferson Pierce, aka Black Lightning. It looks like Batman asked for his help, and they came up with the idea of making Pierce pose as Lucius Fox's brother to get safely inside the enemy's lair. We soon see another familiar face, and this time it's Tatsu Yamashiro, aka Katana, who has come to join the battle and collect some souls while she's at it. Now, because Markovia is being attacked by the Nazis, Katana has come to take her revenge on General Carnes for the death of her family, and due to her sudden attack, Batman and Black Lightning's plans of taking the approach of non-violence gets blown out of proportion. So now, Batman has captured friends to rescue. We're taken back to Dr. Jace's lab, where it looks like she's managed to give Prince Brian special powers, and he has now become the savior that Markovia has been waiting for, and will go by the name Geoforce. Some of the Nazis find them and try to capture Dr. Jace when another person from the past reveals himself. This time, it's one of our favorite superheroes, Metamorpho, aka Rex Mason. Apparently, he was waiting for Dr. Jace all along so that she can help him make a cure to turn him into Mason again. Well, they all fight, and the Nazi soldiers think that they've killed Geoforce, but surprise, surprise, he's still alive. We then meet another person whom Batman calls Halo because she doesn't remember who she is and seems to have a power that glows. They decide to help each other out, but Halo's unplanned attack on the soldiers ends up with Batman getting captured. At least the good thing is he ended up in the same room as Lucius Fox and Black Lightning. However, the first issue ends with quite the surprise. The person responsible for the insurrection in Markovia quickly reveals himself because he's excited to meet Batman. This person goes by the name Baron Bedlam. The second issue, titled Markovia's Last Stand, is where the magic happens. You see, so far in their story, the Outsiders have not really become the Outsiders yet. They're just a bunch of scattered superheroes who seem a bit aimless in life. The second issue begins with Baron Bedlam's interesting backstory. His real name is Frederick Delam, and apparently Bedlam was born in Markovia itself. In fact, his father used to work for the government of King Victor, but then the Nazis came to occupy Markovia, and they exiled King Victor and made his father their regent. Naturally, as the son of a regent, Bedlam used to enjoy anything and everything under the sun. But then, the Americans fought the war and liberated Markovia. King Victor was now back to his throne, and the people of Markovia saw to it that Bedlam's father was killed. However, Bedlam managed to escape and hatched the plan of becoming a powerful and influential political leader with a mercenary army by his side. That's how he ended up invading the country of Markovia. So, he leaves all the superheroes to their misery and heads for the castle of Markovia to take the throne by force. But Black Lightning is finally able to channel his powers and frees Batman and Metamorpho. Now, this is the time when we first see the idea of a new team pop up in Batman's mind. You see, Katana and Halo managed to rescue Lucius Fox all by themselves, and then Batman was ready to take the fight to the Baron himself with the assistance of Black Lightning, Metamorpho, Katana, and Halo. This panel seems a bit nostalgic, doesn't it? It all feels like the younger stages of the Justice League. Well, Batman felt the same. On one hand, Baron manages to get special powers by facing Dr. Jace, and on another, we see that Prince Brian has come back to life due to his new Geoforce powers. The moment Baron Bedlam attacks Gregor, the prince who is bound to become king, Geoforce charges in and knocks him down. The two are engaged in a crazy battle while the other superheroes are also busy fighting Bedlam's men. Now, obviously, Geoforce manages to defeat Bedlam and save Markovia. He decides that it's best to leave Bedlam's fate in the hands of the people who suffered the most because of him. As the battle comes to an end, we see that the superheroes are struggling to figure out what to do with themselves, and this is when Batman suggests that they should all team up and help him save the glorious city of Gotham. And with that, we officially get to meet the Outsiders, since they're literally all a bunch of outsiders. The different iterations of the Outsiders over the years. At this point, we know the story of how the Outsiders came together and started to work as a team, so you might be wondering what else can be new about them, apart from going on missions with Batman and saving people, of course. Well, there are several twists and turns that eventually happen within the Outsiders team. As we saw, their origin in the DC Universe takes place in the first issue of Batman and the Outsiders, which was published back in 1983. Their journey with Batman continues until issue number 32, which came out in '86. Now, this is when things start to change with this team that Batman has built. The events of issue 32 changes the ways in which Batman and the Outsiders have been working so far. You see, it's similar to the frustration Batman eventually felt with the Justice League. He had started to treat the Outsiders as his employees rather than his equals, and he wants them to always follow his orders. Now, if we know one thing about superheroes, it's that they rarely like to be ordered around. In issue 32, Batman hid a very significant piece of information from Geoforce and the rest of the Outsiders. Apparently, Baron Bedlam was back in Markovia and wreaking havoc. Dr. Jace updated Batman on the situation so that the team could come and help out the nation, but Batman chose not to tell anyone about it. But the rat gets out of the bag when Dr. Jace gets a hold of Geoforce and gives him the news herself. The Outsiders are enraged by Batman's behavior, so they decide to continue the team without him, and once again, our vigilante is left alone. The next few issues that came out had the title of Adventures of the Outsiders, since Batman was no longer on the team. In fact, right from issue 33, a new person joins their ranks. We met her during the events of Batman and the Outsiders, and her name is Looker, aka Emily Briggs, and she's a metahuman telepath. The journey of this Outsiders team that includes Looker takes place mostly in Los Angeles, as the team relocated there, and it's brought to us in the comic series titled The Outsiders, which had a total of 28 issues. With the last issue being released in 1988, this team of Outsiders disbanded for a long time because Metamorpho died. Eventually, in 1993, Geoforce recreated the Outsiders when a bunch of vampires took over Markovia. This newer version of the Outsiders did not have Black Lightning, Metamorpho, or Batman. Instead of them, the new superheroes who joined the team were Technocrat, Charlie Wilde, and Sebastian Faust. This version of the Outsiders wasn't able to sustain, and so it was kind of short-lived. One of the only major events that happened, though, was that Looker ended up becoming a vampire. Surprising, right? This is considered to be Volume 2 of the Outsiders comic series, which ran for a total of 26 issues, with the last one coming out in 1995. Then, in 2003, came another version of the Outsiders and what we would consider the third volume of their comic series. And believe it or not, it ran for 50 issues and finally came to a close in 2007. Now, everything was different about this team. First of all, as some of you might remember, the Titans team broke up in 2003 following the events that happened in Titans/Young Justice graduation day. So, Nightwing and Arsenal wanted to create a special covert team that would basically aim to catch supervillains before they could execute any real damage. And my dear Batman fans, this is how this team came together. They're made up of either the protégés or the children of the original Outsiders. So, the members include Nightwing, Arsenal, Jade, Shift, who's a version of Metamorpho, Indigo, and two new characters who are Thunder, Black Lightning's daughter, and Grace. Even though Nightwing was their leader, he was always too emotionally detached from them, so later, Jade decided to take over and she added a new member to the crew, Starfire. After several of their missions together, this version of the Outsiders was asked to become the covert superhero team for the espionage agency known as Checkmate. Soon after getting themselves out of the grip of Checkmate, Nightwing decided that it would be best if Batman was in charge of the Outsiders, so in typical Batman fashion, he fired all those young hot-headed heroes from this team whom he didn't find worthy enough, and a new team of Outsiders was formed once again with some of our favorites. It included Katana, Geoforce, Black Lightning, Metamorpho, Green Arrow, Catwoman, and Cassandra Cain's Batgirl. But this team didn't get to go on a whole lot of adventures because they soon had to be disbanded due to the Batman RIP event. Now that Batman was assumed dead, Alfred Pennyworth brought together the main team whose adventures we get to see in the 4th volume of the Outsiders comic series. This team consists of our OGs, Halo, Katana, Geoforce, Metamorpho, Black Lightning, along with the Creeper and Owlman. This is the team that got to witness Robert Langstrom change himself into Man-Bat. Volume 4 lasted for 25 issues and ended in 2011. After this, a very interesting twist came about when the team appeared in the New 52 era when they were living in Markovia. Batman came back, and during these events, the new team of the Outsiders was led by Red Robin, aka Tim Drake. They presented themselves as undercover superheroes who were part of Batman Incorporated. The members of this team were Looker, Halo, Katana, Metamorpho, Red Robin, and Freight Train. Unfortunately, this team also didn't last very long since, except for Red Robin, the rest were assumed to have died. But in 2012, with the publication of the 2nd volume of Batman Incorporated, we found out that they were very much alive and just faking their deaths so that Leviathan wouldn't consider them a threat anymore. After all these small groups, we finally get the 3rd incarnation of Batman and the Outsiders in 2017 in the events of Dark Knight's Metal. He brought together the original Outsiders team for their help in looking for rare kinds of metals. However, after completing this mission, the team was again not seen for quite some time until 2018. This time, after Batman and Black Lightning fought a villain known as Karma, Batman decided to create a new Outsiders team which would consist of Black Lightning, Katana, Signal, and Cassandra Cain. Soon, Black Lightning took over the workings of the team and replaced Cassandra with Metamorpho. Alright, now that we've looked well and deep into the past, it's time to look at the present. The current team of the Outsiders are absolutely fascinating, and everything is different about them. We meet them in the 5th volume of the comic series, which is known as Outsiders: Dawn of DC, Unearthing the Secrets of the DC Universe, and it was published early last year in January 2024, running for 11 issues. The creators of this latest iteration of the Outsiders are Jackson Lansing, Colin Kelly, and Robert Carey. The team includes our very own Luke Fox, aka Batwing, and the son of Lucius Fox, alongside Kate Kane as Batwoman, and a new character joining their ranks who goes by the name Drummer. Now, based on the title, you can probably guess what these Outsiders are up to. Well, their mission is sort of like gathering data and knowledge rather than fighting bad guys. As we know, the DC multiverse has expanded and shrunk several times, which has resulted in countless stories being lost in the history of the multiverse. So, this new team of Outsiders has to figure out and search for all these forgotten histories, and they definitely look very promising. Some interesting comic stories from their journey. Crisis on Infinite Earth. During the events that take place in this comic series, we see Batman, Black Lightning, Halo, Katana, and Metamorpho trying to save the citizens of New York from an antimatter wave alongside the Titans. But soon after, during World War II, Geoforce is asked to go to Markovia with Dr. Polaris and Blue Beetle to assist Easy Company and the Losers in fighting the Nazis and the Shadow Demons. Another time we see a member of the Outsiders is when Psycho Pirate starts to turn heroes into the complete opposite. Katana then fights against the Judo Master. Later on, the Outsiders also volunteer at the Cosmic Treadmill and end up going to Earth X. Now, the proof that they remember the crisis is that they all eventually return to the Big Bang to fight the Anti-Monitor. They also continue to help out in battles when the Anti-Monitor returns. Los Angeles. Now, this is the part in their story where Batman left the team and Looker joined them as they relocated their headquarters to LA. So, obviously, for the longest time, the Outsiders fought the bad guys without Batman, but you might be surprised to know that in 1986, an issue came out known as Outsiders Annual. For the events of this storyline, Batman rejoined the team because the Outsiders were about to go on a war between Simon Pawns of Skull and Cobra. After it was over, Batman went his own way. During the events in the first volume of The Outsiders, there was a point where Geoforce actually chose to quit as their leader. Soon after that, in Secret Origins Volume 2, we see the dynamic and stunning duo of Halo and Katana. Halo went to see the grave of her parents, and since it was her first birthday, Katana made a very charming new costume for her. Sometime later, guess who makes another appearance? None other than Psycho Pirate. In the first issue of the Outsiders special, Psycho Pirate wanted to take over Markovia, so he came dressed as Baron Bedlam. This is when we see that the Outsiders have joined forces with everyone's favorite superhero team from LA, Infinity Inc. Both teams fight together against Psycho Pirate in order to keep Markovia safe. Millennium! You might have thought that a time like this would never come, but it did. Sometime after the events involving Psycho Pirate, the Outsiders were actually considered to be the enemies of America, and so the American Security Agency was after them. And all of this was happening when Windfall had already joined the Outsiders team. The team then obviously went to the safest place they had, Markovia, but guess what? This led to the death of King Gregor, and the government wanted Markovia to peacefully hand over the Outsiders. After these events, Atomic Knight became a part of the Outsiders crew, but far more terrible things were about to happen to this team, and they had not even begun to scratch the surface yet. During the events that occurred in the Millennium, the primary target of all superheroes were the Manhunters. We also soon found out that Helga Jace was a part of this cult, and in fact, she was the one who murdered King Gregor. Before the Outsiders could do anything, she had Metamorpho under some kind of spell and was making him do her dirty work. Metamorpho, unwillingly of course, ended up capturing the Outsiders, and Dr. Jace started her magic. She bound their minds to the mind of Atomic Knight and made them a part of his fantasy. But they all soon managed to break free from it, and Metamorpho tried to capture her. Now, of course, Helga Jace was not going to let that happen, so she shot at Metamorpho with some strange kind of weapon, and this led to both of their deaths. The team didn't even get to mourn him properly before they fell into a trap laid out by the Manhunters and got captured in Abyssia. The battle that followed would lead to a huge victory and a huge loss for the Outsiders. They were able to defeat the Manhunters and destroy them, but it came at a horrifying price. In the midst of all this ruckus, Looker lost her powers and Halo got shot. She's not dead, but she is in a coma. After seeing the suffering that the team was going through, Geoforce made the hardest decision of his life and disbanded them. But worry not, because in the second volume of the Outsiders comic series, when the team gets back together, Looker has managed to regain her powers, which she uses to bring Halo out of her coma. 0 Hour! Crisis in Time! As the title would suggest, there literally was a crisis looming around. Superman brought all of Earth's heroes together because he needed assistance in dealing with the crisis of entropy. Geoforce and Katana were also a part of this group of heroes. The two of them, along with a few other superpowers, were sent traveling through time and into the future, where they battled extant Teen Titans. But even this could not stop the entropy because it was created by Parallax. In the end, the Outsiders found themselves truly helpless. Day of Judgment! This was a limited series, so the Outsiders barely appear, but they are there. The gates of hell had opened up during the events of the Day of Judgment, and the Outsiders were all ready to help out. We also meet a new member who comes as the Second Terra. The team fought the demons who were residing in Markovia. Later, we also see the second Dr. Light join the Outsiders team. This happens in Justice League Association, Our Worlds at War, when the team has gone to the South Pole to fight an Imperiex probe. Sometime after these events, the Outsiders apparently split up, but we don't know why. Exploring the 9 members of the original Outsiders team. I know what you might be wondering. Based on all the characters who became a part of the Outsiders team, shouldn't there technically be 10 members? Well, yes, there are, if you include Batman. I mean, it's obvious that he's going to be a part of the original team, right? After all, he was the one who founded them, so that's why we'll be focusing on the other 9 members. Even though the Outsiders team has seen many different versions and iterations over the years, these 9 characters are considered the OGs, so let's take a look at them. Geoforce! As you might remember, Geoforce is actually one of the founding members of the original team of Outsiders. He was born Brian Markov, son of the King of Markovia, King Victor. This nation that stands between Belgium and France has always been one of the main locations that's a part of the Outsiders storylines. We see in the first issue of Batman and the Outsiders that Brian's life completely changed when he had to make some hard decisions because his country was invaded by Baron Bedlam. During this time, he gained the powers of the planet Earth through the scientific experiments of Dr. Helga Jace, and that's why he's called Geoforce. Throughout his journey, Geoforce lost the people from his family who were the most important to him. First his father, then his older brother, after which he became the king, and then his half-sister Terra. He didn't take her death very well, which was evident through his behavior and anger towards Deathstroke. As for his powers, he has direct elemental power that links to the gravitational forces of Earth. This means that he has total control over Earth and gravity, because he can use gravity as his protective shield or lift big things with absolute ease to use them as weapons. He also has the power to manipulate Earth, which allows him to move any type of mineral or Earth matter at a moment's notice. He also has a special ability where he can technically communicate with the Earth to use it as a tracking device. If he's ever buried alive, his enemies will have an exceptionally hard time fighting him because being a part of the Earth will heal him instantly. There's another ability that he calls Lava Blast, through which he can basically generate enough heat in his body to turn ground matter into lava. The power of controlling gravity also allows him to fly. He's invulnerable to such an extent that his superhuman strengths and agility have been compared to Wonder Woman. Metamorpho! Rex Mason was an excellent adventurer, and that's what helped him get hired by Simon Stagg, a businessman who wanted a certain artifact from Egypt. It was known as the Orb of Ra, and it was ancient and precious. Mason went on a trip to find the orb, but soon after he located it, Stagg's bodyguard, Java, steals it from him and leaves him unconscious inside an ancient pyramid. Now, this is the time when Mason accidentally ends up receiving superpowers. You see, when he was unconscious, he kind of got exposed to the radiation coming from the meteorite fragments that were actually used to make the Orb of Ra. Now, as you might remember, Metamorpho was also part of the very first team of Outsiders. And all of this became possible because we found him in Markovia, where he was searching for Dr. Helga Jace. Ever since Rex Mason received his powers and got transformed into Metamorpho, he used to detest himself. He's been trying to find a cure for his condition, and that's what led him to Dr. Jace. He also helped out Batman and Geoforce with the whole Baron Bedlam situation in Markovia. In fact, recall, he was the one who accidentally came up with the name for their team. He was merely pointing out that they were just a bunch of outsiders, and it looks like the name stuck. The power that Metamorpho has is especially unique. He can basically transform any part of his body into any element. This doesn't just stop at transforming a limb or two, but whichever part of himself he transforms, he can make the result as big or small as he wants. It seems that he can shape his transformation at will. Essentially, he can take on the form of plasma, solid, liquid, or gas, or literally anything else. This automatically means that he has superhuman strength and he's invulnerable to a certain extent because once he transforms, even energy attacks don't faze him. Halo! If you're familiar with everything going on in the DC universe, then you probably know what the Source is, but if not, let's give you a quick reminder. In this multiverse, the Source is like the creator, who released something known as the God Wave, which led to the creation of gods and superheroes in DC. So, around this time, one of the very first races that were born were known as Oracles. They are basically some of the first signs of life in the universe. Now, when we first meet Halo in the comics, we don't know any of this about her, but she's actually one of the descendants who came from the Oracles. So, she's actually been alive for like a really long time. She's different than the other Oracles since she's always been invested in watching the affairs of the human beings. She would often imagine being one herself. Looks like the universe heard her because her wish soon came true. During the events in Markovia, we see that when Batman stumbles upon Halo for the first time, she seems a bit out of it. I mean, she has no idea who she is. This happened because, as an Oracle, she was watching over Markovia and noticed what was going on. Just then, she saw that an assassin named Cyanide killed a woman known as Violet Harper. Halo feels extremely sad about this and wishes that she could do something to help her. Just then, it looks like Halo ends up entering the mortal world and becomes a part of Violet Harper's dead body. When she wakes up, she has no memories of being an Oracle. She also seems to have no memory of Violet's life or her personality. So, it's safe to say that whoever we meet is actually just Halo and not a mixture of two different people. So basically, even after becoming a human being, Halo could still access her powers from her Oracle days. She can create auras of spirit energy around herself that glow. These auras are of different colors based on the color spectrum, and each of them has different abilities. Violet is one of the most important powers since it basically gives her an access to all her powers at once. So by using this, she doesn't have to change from one aura to another. Indigo gives her a very strong tractor beam. Blue is similar to a shadow clone jutsu. It basically allows her the ability to distort and project multiple copies of herself. Green creates a kind of beam through which she can manipulate people or even objects. Yellow is a blinding light for her enemies. Orange gives her the power of a blast so great that it can knock down an enemy in one go. And finally, red produces a type of energy shield around her through which she can produce heat beams that are strong enough to melt or burn through anything. Black Lightning! This man needs no introduction as he's everyone's favorite Jefferson Pierce. Before he got his powers, he was a relatively normal man. He was an Olympic gold medalist and a very enthusiastic teacher. One day, he was trying his level best to make sure that there were no drug pushers in his school. A student named Earl Clifford helped Pierce in this endeavor, which later got him killed by a notorious gang member. This incident enraged Pierce the most, so he went to the man he trusted the most for some help. This guy was Peter Gamby. He owned a tailor shop which was straight down from the house where Pierce used to live with his mom. While growing up, Pierce had become very close with Gamby. Now, the guy made a costume for Pierce with a special belt that gave him powers whenever he wore it. Over time, due to prolonged use of the belt, he gained the powers permanently and became Black Lightning. He was also present in Markovia at the time of the conflict as the only aide that Batman brought with him. Although the plan that Batman and Black Lightning had come up with didn't succeed, they still ended up saving Lucius Fox due to a team effort. Now, because Black Lightning used to have an Olympic career and was literally a gold medalist, he obviously peaks when it comes to physical fitness, especially high stamina, strength, and speed. Naturally, all of these abilities were enhanced after he gained his powers. Due to his electrokinesis, he can create, manipulate, and control electricity as he pleases. He can also absorb electrical energy and then project it in whichever way or form he thinks best. And the most interesting part is that he can actually heal people as well using his electricity. He's capable of renewing damaged cells. In fact, one time, he was successfully able to restart Superman's heart. Katana! Tatsu Yamashiro always had an interest in martial arts. From a very young age, she trained herself in the art of hand-to-hand combat. After she grew up, two brothers, Masao and Takeo, fell deeply in love with her, but Tatsu chose to marry Masao. They went on to have 2 kids and were oblivious to the fact that Takeo had been planning to take revenge on their entire family. He blamed Masao for stealing Tatsu from him, and as part of his revenge, he acquired a very special weapon known as Soul Taker's Sword. General Carnes, a Nazi high-ranking officer, was the one who sold it to him. Takeo used this sword to kill Tatsu's husband, and then set their house on fire, which killed their kids as well. Due to this, Tatsu went back to her training to become a samurai, and then acquired the Soul Taker's Sword and gave herself the name Katana. Sometime later, Katana ended up in Markovia, where she was searching for General Carnes to take her revenge on him. She succeeded in one go, but got caught up in Markovia due to the infamous situation. This was when she met the other people who would become the Outsiders. She helped Halo in rescuing Batman and Black Lightning and then fought beside them to save Markovia. As we already know, Katana is the best at martial arts, so it makes sense that she would use a sword like the Soul Taker as her main weapon. The sword gives her the power to take the soul of whomever she kills. Ever since the sword came into existence, it's killed a huge number of people, so there are a significant amount of people whose souls are stuck inside the limbo of the sword, including her dead husband. Sometimes, if Katana wants, she can summon them to speak to her through the sword. Apart from that, she's probably the best wielder of said sword. Looker! Emily Briggs always used to think that she was an ugly duckling, but soon something happened in her life that completely changed her. There was a lost underground colony of Abyssia, and apparently, Emily's paternal grandfather used to sit on the throne of this nation. Emily found out all of this new information when someone from Abyssia kidnapped her and told her that she was next in line to take the throne for herself, since the nation had generationally structured governing. Soon, they told her that she would go through certain transformations after being exposed to the fragments from Halley's Comet, which fell around 2,000 years ago. After this, the transformation that she had was actually quite phenomenal. She became super confident in herself and her looks changed entirely. Basically, it transformed her appearance and her personality for good. She also then changed her name to Leah. She was rescued from Abyssia by the Outsiders, and then they needed her help to fight against and free themselves from a mercenary gang that consisted of metahumans who called themselves Masters of Disaster. Then, the Outsiders asked her to join their team, and that was when she gave herself the name Looker. After all, she was drop-dead gorgeous. She's known as a very strong mentalist due to her psionic powers. They appear in the form of blue glow-like beams from her head. These psionic powers give her the ability of telepathy, as well as the ability to put mental blocks in her enemies' heads and even communicate mentally. She also has the power of telekinesis, which helps her in creating psionic force fields. Windfall! Wendy Jones's life was quite terrifying from the beginning. She had an older sister who was a bit too much of a psychopath. She is the aquatic metamorph known as New Wave, and she used to mistreat Wendy both mentally and physically. Soon after New Wave got her powers, she murdered their parents. This left Wendy in fear for her life all the time. When she grew up, New Wave would order Wendy to do her bidding for her. New Wave was the leader of the Masters of Disaster, and that is why she forced Wendy to join this supervillain crew as well. Since Wendy was also born with powers, she could control air currents in her surroundings, which is why she named herself Windfall. She's capable of shooting wind bursts, and she can even fly with her powers. New Wave would always force Windfall to commit some act of crime, even though she never wanted to. In fact, in one of the Outsiders' encounters with the Masters of Disaster, New Wave ordered Windfall to fight the Outsiders and kill them if necessary. Instead, we find that Windfall betrays her psychotic older sister and helps out Halo when she needs it. This built a bond between the two, and then Windfall's sense of right versus wrong was shaken up, and she left her sister to go help out the Outsiders. She then joined their team and even became roomies with Halo and Katana. Atomic Knight! Gardner Grail was a part of the Army. In fact, he was the Army Sergeant of the 13th Platoon. He was a person who always advocated against nuclear weapons. He believed that they were wrong to use in a battle and highly unlawful. In any case, he wanted to see how the citizens would feel about a post-atomic war world, and to find out, he volunteered as a test subject at Star Labs. They were in the middle of building a nuclear weapon, so as a test subject, Grail was given atomic weapons and armor. When Grail was sent into the virtual world, he envisioned that he'd become a knight in shining armor, so when he got out, he literally became the Atomic Knight. Atomic Knight became a part of the Outsiders during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He helped Geoforce in saving Markovia yet again, and was then a witness to the whole plot where Dr. Helga Jace betrayed them by becoming a part of the Manhunters. He then aided the team in fighting these enemies and became a member of the Outsiders himself. The armor that he wears helps him in a lot of ways. Since it runs on solar energy, it can produce heat or cold levels even in decreased light. He can also use the energy coming from his armor to make weapons. He has an exceptionally advanced mind and also has super strength and durability. Sebastian Faust! Sebastian is the son of sorcerer Felix Faust, who's always been into magic. While growing up, Sebastian was also tainted with magic due to his father's antics. In fact, Sebastian was still just a teen when his father decided to sell his soul to the demon named Nibirios in exchange for access to initiate magic. But to his surprise, Felix had no idea that Nibirios would betray him. The demon instead gave the powers of that magic to Sebastian. Now, even though at this point Sebastian didn't have a soul, he was still able to tap into soul magic, which eventually became his superpowers. His life at home was horrible because he had to see how his mother would suffer due to his father's magic, so one day, after her death, Sebastian ran away and left his dad and sister Fauna behind. Eventually, he became one of the most powerful mages of soul magic to ever exist. Faust became a part of the Outsiders team a little late. In 1993, he went to Markovia for some work. Just then, the vampires had attacked the nation and he was fighting them off, and on that battlefield he met the Outsiders. One of them, Charlie Wilde, was attacked by a bear, and the Outsiders wanted Faust's aid in saving him. This meant that he would have to use his magic. Now, every time that Faust uses his magic, something new happens. This time, he ended up becoming a creature who was half bear and half man in order to save Charlie. Despite these specific features concerning his magic, the Outsiders wanted him to be a part of their team, but they asked him to never use his magic unless it was a life-or-death situation because his magic would always come with a cost. Faust's powers work in mysterious ways since they come from the demon Nibirios. He has the ability to morph himself with other beings, heal people, project magical energy, which assists him in fighting, and other magical abilities. One of the most interesting things about his soul magic is that it allows him to borrow powers from those whose souls he taps. This means that he can practically borrow powers from any superhero on the planet. Marvelous verdict! With that, we've come to the end of yet another Marvelous videos. The Outsiders are definitely a very vast team with a long history. A bunch of nobodies who came together and decided to save the world. Now, that's what we call a superhero team. Although they started off with just 6 people, the team grew so big over the years that we're sure it's now impossible to imagine the DC multiverse without them. Well, lucky for us, we don't even have to. The latest iteration of the Outsiders also didn't fail to impress. In fact, everything about them just keeps getting more interesting. So, what are some of the things that you loved about The Outsiders? Is there any particular team member who's your favorite, a story arc you like the most? And what other subjects from the DC multiverse would you like us to explore? Tell us all about it in the comments down below, because we're always looking for new ideas for videos. And if you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe on your way out. It means the world to us when you help us grow. Unfortunately, that's all we got for you this time, but thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.